And hello everybody and welcome to another edition of the Movie Pit Spoiler Review Podcasts. This is of course where, as I just mentioned, here on the Movie Pit we will be spoiler reviewing a movie, and as you can tell from the title, we will be spoiler reviewing Spider-Man Homecoming. It is the big movie, one of the biggest movies probably of the summer so far. As you can see, very successful at the box office, and fans have been pretty taken by it. So, no messing around. Let's get right to it. Our review, a spoiler-filled review, I should mention, once again, of Spider-Man Homecoming.
Finally, here we go.
Good evening, Peter.
Whoa!
You have 576 possible web shooter combinations.
That is awesome. I can keep that suit?
Yeah, doesn't fit me.
When's our next retreat?
What, next mission? We'll call you. All right?
That's not a hug. I'm just grabbing the door for you.
We're not there yet.
All right, kid.
Good luck out there.
Hey, Peter. You coming tonight? I can't tonight. I got the Stark internship. What's up, guys? Mr. Stark, here's my report for tonight. I stopped the Grand Theft bicycle. Hey, could you do me a favor? Hold on to that. Is this anybody's bike? Oh, I helped this old lady, and she bought me a churro. So, that was nice. I just feel like I could be doing more. Wait a minute. You guys aren't the real Avengers. Hulk gives it away. New move I'm working on? Not bad. Oh, God, this feels so strange. These weapons are crazy dangerous.
Listen, Peter, there are people who handle this sort of thing. Can't you just be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man?
Let go of me! Let go of me!
Activating parachute.
The world's changing, boys. It's time we change too.
This is my chance to prove myself.
We have a Spanish quiz.
You gotta get better at this part of the job.
I don't understand. Oh, I'm intimidated. Oh, hey, guys.
Our friends are up there! Hey, where are you going? What are you hiding, Peter? I'm just kidding, I don't care. Bye.
There's a ton of other subsystems in here, but they're all disabled by the training wheels protocol.
I'm sick of Mr. Stark treating me like a kid.
But you are a kid.
Yeah, a kid who can stop a bus with his bare hand.
So the film opens up with, surprisingly not Tom Holland's Peter Parker / Spider-Man. It actually opens up with Michael Keaton's Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, of course, from the comics. Although they never actually really call him the Vulture. I mean, they call him the Vulture guy, which is probably as close as we'll get to calling him the Vulture. But anyway, it opens up with him and his crew cleaning up the mess from the Battle of New York from the first Avengers movie, and them getting kicked out by the Department of Damage Control, which is of course a nice nod to the comics, where there is a group called Damage Control that cleans up the messes of superhero battles. Anyway, they discover that they when they get kicked out, they discover they still have alien tech from the Chitauri, and they decide that if the world's changing, they should too. So they, of course, keep it, and one of the guys who is the Tinkerer in the comics, though they don't call him the Tinkerer in the movie, he, starts building stuff, and we cut to years later, and we see Adrian and in a fully functioning Vulture suit that he uses to steal from Damage Control. And then, so that's the opening of the movie. And then that's them, and then, of course, we cut to a home video, kind of almost kind of like a vlog of Peter Parker, of course, played by Tom Holland, and it's set during the events of Captain America Civil War. So he's going, and he goes to Berlin, and he goes to the hotel room, and he sees the new suit for the first time. And, of course, he even vlogs when, there's that nice shot of Giant Man in the background, and he's like, oh, I gotta go, and then we see, someone flying. And of course, the nice freak out after his hotel room, and Happy Hogan, of course, played by Jon Favreau, he's like, we got thin walls. So anyway, after that, we see him and Tony together, and he says he can keep the suit as long as he keeps to the ground and, works within the gray area. And then we cut forward toward, it was like 2 months, 3 months, and we see Peter getting a little antsy to get back into the action. You know, all those text messages, basically the same. It seems like the same text message over and over again to Happy Hogan. So he's stuck, you know, doing small stuff. He's stuck, you know, stealing. He's stuck catching the guy that steals the bike and helping, you know, the old Dominican lady who bought him a churro. And then, you know, one night, you know, he sees bank robbers in Avengers masks stealing the money from the ATMs, and this is the first time that he encounters the alien tech weapons, and that ends up becoming for him his first mission to really prove himself to Tony Stark, and potentially making him become an Avenger, since that's probably his dream. And at this point, Tony puts, you know, Happy Hogan to make sure that Peter doesn't get into too much trouble, but Happy is too busy, you know, with moving everything from the old Stark Tower, now the Avengers Tower, to the new facility that we've seen in the last few films, because Tony sold the building to someone else. We don't know who it is. Of course, fans are already speculating who he probably sold the building to, but there's that. And Peter, after he encounters this, you know, he tries to tell Happy and he tries to warn him, and he just kind of blows him off. He's like, I don't have time for that. So there you go. And of course, you know, it doesn't help that Peter also has to deal with Ned, played by Jacob Batalon, I'm sorry, his best friend. He finds out he's Spider-Man and makes him a promise not to tell anyone, especially his Aunt May, of course played by Marisa Tomei. Since this version of Aunt May seems a little bit more overprotective than the other ones that we've seen so far in the movies. At least that's the way kind of I viewed it. But either way, Peter has to, you know, keep going to school, and he finds out that his crush, Liz, you know, he has to deal with his crush, Liz, played by Laura Harrier. He has to deal with Flash Thompson, played by Tony, I'm going to butcher it, I never say his last name right. Revolali? I don't know, that's probably wrong. He's constantly bullying him, and he calls him Penis Parker throughout the movie. And he has to deal with the constant insults from Michelle, played by Zendaya, and of course having to deal with the secondary villain in the movie, Shocker, played by Bokeem Woodbine, who works for Adrian. So on paper, and even hearing all that, it sounds like there's a lot going on. And it does seem like there's a lot going on. However, Spider-Man Homecoming somehow makes it all work. And I will be honest with you, when I saw Spider-Man Homecoming, despite the fact that the first time I saw it, which was on Thursday night, there was technical difficulties with the screen, so our screening started a half hour later, so we were all kind of just sitting there waiting to see what the hell was going on. But even then, and when I saw it the second time, because I saw it twice already, seeing it the second time, the movie still moves at a pretty brisk pace. The movie is over 2 hours long. It's 2 hours and 13 minutes, to be more precise, but it never feels long. Sure, there's a lot going on, but it never feels like it's 2 hours and 13 minutes. And there's only one real time where I felt that the movie really kind of slowed down, and that was when Peter, you know, after stopping Adrian from stealing more tech from Damage Control, gets stuck in the Damage Control warehouse. And even though we see him going through, you know, some of the cool webbing techniques after he hacked the system to, you know, kind of get everything, you know, to take the training wheels program off, and giving his suit AI a name, which of course was very fun. The dynamic between them was very funny. Suit Lady, and of course he ends up calling her Karen. Voiced by Jennifer Connelly, of all people, the real life wife of Paul Bettany, who is, of course, Jarvis, aka the Vision in the Avengers movies. But you know, we get to see all that, and it's funny, and the dynamic is funny. That's kind of and it's great. The dynamic is great, but I felt like that was the only kind of real time the movie slowed down within the pacing that they were giving us, at least for me. But the pacing in this movie is fantastic. There's really no pacing problems in this movie, because again, it's 2 hours 13 minutes. I didn't really feel like it was 2 hours and 13 minutes. And if you ask me to describe the movie in one word, it would be fun. And I think that's why the movie works so well, and why the movie doesn't feel long, because it's a lot of fun, and it's funny. It is damn funny. There's, I wasn't expecting, the movie to be that funny. I mean, yeah, sure, there was probably going to be like jokes in there and whatever, and of course the character of Spider-Man lends himself to be a more humorous character than some of the others, but the humor really works here, and it's just filled with great just humor, and everyone was spot on. And I don't want to repeat any of the jokes because I probably say them wrong, or something that you probably love, and if for whatever reason you're listening to this podcast, even though it's a spoiler podcast, I don't want to ruin the lines for you because they're damn funny. But it's the humor in this movie is top notch, and most of it comes from the chemistry between Peter and Ned, which I'll get to a little bit later. But it's just the movie overall is fun. But the movie, if you ask me what was, besides it being fun, I would say the humor for sure. So anyway, besides being being humorous and funny, there are some emotional scenes. There are some tension-filled, maybe horrifying scenes for some. Of course, the scene that pops into my head, being the emotional side, is Peter talking to Tony after the much promoted ferry scene, the ship ferry. And just watching Tom Holland's Peter trying to plead his case about trying to tell him, Tony, and happy about the weapons before, and then not listening to him at all. And even though, they're not listening to him and he's pleading his case, some of it's kind of true because they weren't really paying attention to him too much. Even though Tony was, because he says the sting operation was Tony's plan. But at the same time, we have to remember that Peter is just a kid. And that's one of the great things about this movie, is that it treats Peter as a kid. He is still a kid. He's still, he's a teenager, but he's still a kid. And while Tony may not be the best mentor in the world, not the shining morality of heroes, he does, have some leeway over Peter on the hero department. And Tony does bring up a good point within the movie, within the movie, but within that scene in particular. If the people on the ferry died, it would have been on Peter. But Peter's death, it would have been on Tony, because he gave him the suit, and he gave him the idea of he can be this big hero because, he took him to Berlin to fight, Captain America and the other Avengers, and, and you basically gave him this big hope, and I keep saying the word, but idea of that he can do everything, and that he can be a hero just like him, and just like Captain America, and just like all the other Avengers. And then you take it away from him by not calling him back and having him deal with these, smaller level, villains. And then when he finally tries to do something to prove himself that he can be that hero again, that same level as them, they kind of just push him to the side. So that's kind of why I like that. I like that scene, but especially better the second time around, because just seeing already knowing kind of what was going to happen and what already happened and stuff like that, and just thinking back and just having a time to sink in, because I saw the movie on Thursday and then I saw it again on yesterday. I saw it on Sunday, so that was pretty cool. So when it comes to the terrifying scene in the movie, it comes of course right after the twist that Adrian is in fact Liz's father, which we didn't know, and a lot of the people. Seeing the second time around, I was like, okay, yeah, I can kind of see where that twist was coming. But the first time, I was just having so much fun with it, and especially the people. When I saw it on Thursday, the people in my screening were amazing. They were totally into it. They were laughing at the right moments. They were just enthralled by it. So when Adrian opens that door at Liz's house, everyone was like, oh, like it was just really cool. So that, of course, that scene leads to a very kind of awkward, touch-and-feel, terrifying scene in the car when Peter and Liz are going to homecoming. And when Adrian starts, putting everything together that Peter is Spider-Man, and then he has that father talk, Keaton just goes all in on that scene, and it works to the fullest effect because Michael Keaton is terrifying. When he wants to be, and in that scene in particular, he is terrifying. Let alone, I don't even think he needed the gun at that point because he pulls out the gun. I don't even think he needed it at that point. He just needed to have the scene by himself. But I love that scene. I love that scene in the car. Just him slowly putting it together, and then talking to Peter and everything. So it was really good. And if you weren't convinced of Michael Keaton as a villain, I mean, he evaporated, one of the first Shocker played by Logan Marshall Green, but if you weren't terrified by him at that point in the movie, that scene probably terrified you of him and worked for him being the villain. So let's talk about the rest of the cast. I'm already talking about Michael Keaton. Like I mentioned, Keaton goes all out. He's great. He's terrifying, and his reasoning for being the villain. I don't know how people feel about that. I mean, personally, when I heard it the first time, I was like, and then I saw it the second time, and I was like, okay, I kind of see a little bit more. Kind of just him being, him basically taking the approach of all these guys, all these rich people, all the powerful people. They don't care about us. They don't care about the little guy anymore. And we see that because at the very beginning of the movie, we see that with him. And it's funny because even though this movie isn't an origin story, it kind of acts as a sort of pseudo origin story, but it's not really an origin story, but at least for Spider-Man. But it is kind of for Vulture, because you can arguably make the reasoning that the beginning of the movie is a origin for Vulture, and Vulture, or Adrian at this point. Again, they don't actually call him the Vulture in the movie, but you can say that yeah, this is how he became the villain. This is how he became to be. So I kind of like that, especially the second time around, because I kind of noticed that the second time around. But I don't know how people will see that, that reasoning behind why he's doing what he's doing. But first time it was like, for me it was and then the second time I was like, okay, I get a little bit more. So Robert Downey Jr., of course, coming back to play Tony Stark / Iron Man. Not in the movie as much as people maybe thought he was going to be. And I get it. He was everywhere, the promos and the posters and the trailers and stuff like that. But he was in the movie for 10 minutes, if that. And, even though he does play a big role in Peter's story, because of course Peter wants to prove himself that he can be the hero to Tony Stark, and of course that that story came out, or that fan theory was confirmed, that the little kid from Iron Man 2 was in fact Peter, although they don't bring that up in the movie, so I don't know why. I don't get the reasoning why they would bring it up during the press tour. I mean, if they brought that up in the movie, I would have appreciated a little bit more that was confirmed, although I wasn't a huge fan of the idea. But they don't bring that up in the movie, so it does seem kind of dumb. Unless the I want to be just like you line was meant to prove that. It doesn't. But yeah, he's not in the movie that much, and people were afraid of that, and I don't know if I was afraid of that. I just kind of felt like, okay, maybe he was gonna be in the movie for a little bit, and I like the fact that they didn't have him come in the final scene to help Spider-Man. This was a Spider-Man movie. This was his movie, and they could have easily gone by like, oh, this but they're gonna do a Spider-Man Iron Man team up to face the Vulture. No, he does it all by himself. And I like that. I like the fact that Sony had some control over that. They were like, oh, we can put Iron Man in there, and they're like, nah, no, let's just let this be a Spider-Man movie, and I like that. I love that they did that. So the young cast, it's a kind of a mixed bag. Laura Harrier, of course, again playing Liz, the love interest. She doesn't really do too much in the movie other than be the love interest, and at the end of it all, it doesn't matter because her character leaves town. And although you can probably make the argument that Liz is what Peter can have, which is a normal, happy life and relationship, at least at this point of him being Spider-Man, she doesn't really do too much in the movie. Zendaya as Michelle has a pretty small role, but like I said, it's she makes funny insults toward Peter throughout the movie, and her deadpan, doesn't really care about anyone's kind of attitude that she has, really makes the character stand out on her own. And of course, like I said, she's not in the movie that long enough, and she's not in the movie enough to really say that she's underused, but she's not in the movie, she's not underused to the fact where you can see like, yeah, she's underused. She pops up in the movie, she's a minor character in the movie, but when she pops up, it's a nice little breath of fresh air. And of course, the big thing, that the reveal at the end that yes, her character is called MJ. And of course, if you're a comic books fan, you're a Spider-Man fan, you know that MJ, of course, is Mary Jane Watson. Now, there's some people saying that maybe this isn't the same. Obviously, this is not the same Mary Jane Watson that we've seen in the past movies or we've seen in the comics. This is a different version of Mary Jane. And I know of course, I wouldn't be doing my podcasting duty host if I didn't mention that, of course, when it was revealed that maybe Zendaya was going to play Mary Jane, that people weren't very happy with it because, you know, you can say whatever you want, but let's face it, the reality was that people weren't happy with that because Zendaya was black. That's it. They were upset that Mary Jane Watson was going to be played by a black actress. I don't think it had anything to do with Zendaya being a person of color. I think it was just because they didn't like the idea of Mary Jane being, again, person of color. And I didn't mind it. Personally, I didn't mind if she was going to play Mary Jane Watson. Of course, you know, being named Michelle, you know, the very vague name, everyone was like, she's playing Mary Jane. So I didn't mind it. And again, she's not in the movie enough to say she was underused, but she's a minor character in the movie. It's a new version of Spider-Man. It's a new version of all these characters. And I didn't mind that. And I kind of like that. I can't wait to see kind of where their relationship goes from here in the sequels. So let's talk about Ned, played by, once again played by Jacob Batalon. He's probably the best of the supporting characters. I mean, you can probably make an argument, but he is the best of the supporting characters, and his chemistry with Tom Holland is fantastic. Their friendship between Ned and Peter feels real, and of course, he becomes, at the end of the movie, he becomes the man in the chair, which is what he wanted to do for Peter. And I liked it. I liked everyone in my theater, and both of my screenings were laughing it up every time when Ned was on screen. So good job by Jacob Batalon. This is the first thing I've seen him in, so I don't know if he is always like this, but he was great in the movie, and I can't wait to see him and Peter come back in the sequel and laugh it up some more. So yeah, he was great. He was arguably the best of the supporting cast for a lot of people, especially for me. He really was. And of course, if you know anything, Ned Leeds, aka the Hobgoblin in the comics. We don't know if that's where they're going to go with the character, but if they don't, I'm cool with that. If they do, it's going to be very interesting. I would love to see how they get to that point. But yeah. Finally, or not finally, but obviously we're going to save Tom Holland for the end. But another character that's a little misused is Marisa Tomei's Aunt May. And yes, to play the sexy aunt card in the movie, but like I mentioned, she's a little bit more overprotective in this one. But again, she's not underdeveloped. She's underutilized. Put it that way. She's underutilized, not underdeveloped. Besides Tony being the mentor, again, arguably say pseudo father to Peter, Aunt May, May is really the only family that Peter has left, and the fact that we don't see her more in the movie giving some wise or mentoring or loving speech kind of feels like a missed opportunity. Like that scene where they're in the kitchen after Tony takes his suit back. I felt like that was a great opportunity for them to have May give a shining give her the spotlight in that scene to comfort Peter. And I think in the trailers, in one of the earlier, I think it was I don't know if it was the first one or the second trailer, you can hear May, I assuming, talking to Peter, saying, "You don't have to carry the weight on your shoulders all the time." And that line is not in the movie, and I really like that line. And I feel like that's where that line was gonna be. But yeah, I think that was a great place to give May the spotlight, and they didn't do it. Of course, obviously, at the very ending of the movie, she finds out that Peter is Spider-Man, and probably one of the funniest scenes in the whole movie. Which, let's face it, that scene changes everything. You want to talk about, changing dynamics and changing, the way the character acts from what we haven't seen. This changes everything. That ending of the movie changes the dynamic between Peter and May, and I would love to see. I'm dying to see where they take that, because Aunt May, in the comics she's figured out sometimes that Peter is Spider-Man, or he tells him, or he tells her, or she finds out, or she always had like an inkling that he was Spider-Man. But this is the first time that we see Aunt May finding out early. And again, this is a different Aunt May, and this is a different Peter, and the dynamic is obviously different. But this is the first time that we see her find out early. And I would love to see where, again, I'm just dying to see how this changes the dynamic, and how this will definitely change the dynamic. I said it early. I gave away my own little thought. Sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained right now, but it changes everything. So I'm dying to see where they go with this. Of course, finally, we're going to talk about Tom Holland, Peter Parker / Spider-Man. Holland he's great. He's absolutely fantastic as Peter Parker and Spider-Man. He's extremely likable. There's just a likability about him. You can root for him. You want to root for him. And I like the fact that, again, they didn't make it easy for him. They made him make mistakes. They made him struggle with him being Spider-Man, a hero, and also being a kid. And they gave him and even though they gave him the opportunity to be a kid, going to homecoming and getting detention and everything, I thought that was great. Now, is Holland the best Peter Parker that we've seen so far? I mean, some are already making the argument that he is. I would make the argument that he is, even though this is his first movie. Now, nothing against Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, but I would dare to say that Spider-Man: Homecoming is probably one of the best, or maybe the best Spider-Man movie we've gotten so far. If it's the best for you, then great. I'm not going to argue with that. I think it is. I think it is probably, one of the best, if not the best Spider-Man movie. Of course, right up there with Spider-Man 2 and the first Amazing Spider-Man for me. Even with its flaws, it's still great. And the flaws are very, very minor flaws that I have. But yeah, I mean, I had nothing against, I personally, when they casted Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker / Spider-Man, I was hesitant at first because I didn't know who Andrew Garfield was. I'd never seen him before. And then I saw the movie and I thought he was great. I actually kind of liked him a little bit better than Tobey Maguire. And, then they casted Tom Holland. I never knew who he was before, and I started seeing him pop up in these small little movies. I've seen a few of his movies before Amazing Spider-Man came out, and then saw him, in Civil War, and I thought he was great. And then we have this, and I think he's great. I think he's a great Peter Parker. He's at that age, where it makes sense a little bit more, and I just can't wait to see what they make him do for the future movies. And he's a great character, and he's extremely likable. He's like, you want to root for him. He's a great kid. All right, so let's talk about those flaws, the little minor gripes. The underdevelopment or underutilized characters of Aunt May and Liz, and I want to put Michelle in there because, again, she's only a minor character. She wasn't really meant to be a big character in the movie, except for the very end where she says, her friends call her MJ, and of course Ned's there and says, like, you don't have any friends, and then she says, I didn't, and she considers the debate. I guess she considers the debate team her friends at this point now, but yeah. So I won't put her in there, but Liz and Aunt May, they're a little. Again, Aunt May underutilized, not undeveloped, just underutilized. Liz was a little underdeveloped in my opinion. The bringing in the damage control, it seems like it felt at first like it was just a way to bring in something else from the comics, but maybe they'll play a factor in the future movies. Maybe there'll be a little bit of a antagonizing force towards Spider-Man. Who knows? We don't know. Or maybe just wanted to bring in something else from the comics. I don't know. So bringing in damage control was odd, but whatever. Also, during the plane fight at the end, I don't know if it was just me, especially the first time, and then I saw it the second time. I was like, no, I still have this problem. It's a little hard at the beginning when they start fighting Vulture and Spider-Man to tell what the hell's going on. Like, it's just, I don't know if it was just, I don't know, like I knew Vulture was swinging the second time around, that he was swinging his wings to knock Peter off the plane, but I don't know if it was just me or it was just a little hard to follow. Maybe it was just me, who knows, but I don't know, that's what it was. Those are my only minor gripes. That's it, just the underdevelopment of Liz, the underutilization of Aunt May, bringing in damage control for some odd reason, and then the plane fight at the end. That's it. That's the only problems I have with the movie. To be honest, that's the only. And then the fact that it slows down just a tiny bit when Peter's stuck in damage control. Even though we get to see these the cool web shooter possibilities, and him him talking to Karen or Suit Lady. Even though that was great, it still felt like it was slowing down. So that's it. That's the only problems I really have with the movie, to be honest. So let's talk about some little Easter eggs and some stuff like that. Not necessarily Easter eggs, but I love the PSA videos by Captain America. I love them. They were so great. They were so funny. It was a nice way of including Captain America in the movie without really including Captain America in the movie. I thought that was, and of course the post-credit scene. The post-credits, oh my god, that final post-credit scene is probably one of the funniest and best post-credit scenes that Marvel has done to date. When he just pops up and he's talking about patience, I seriously, when that happened, the first time, again, when I saw it on Thursday, the crowd was already, they were already into it and everything, so I knew they would get it. But when I saw it the second time, I didn't know if people would get it. I don't know why, but I just thought, I don't know if people would get it, but everyone got it, and I was so happy. It's probably one of the greatest and funniest and best post-credit scenes that Marvel has done, in my opinion. Because it's a bit meta, it's a bit making fun of the fans, but letting them in on the joke. It's great. I love it. Of course, so another Easter egg, of course, right from the beginning, when the Marvel Studios logo pops up, they play the original Spider-Man song. Spider-Man, all that. I thought that was kind of funny. Mark Gargan appears in the movie, played by Michael Mandigo, the man with the scorpion tattoo on his neck, which is in fact playing the Spider-Man villain Scorpion, because Mark Gargan is the real name of the Scorpion character. And he mentions in the second post-credit scene, he mentions that he has some friends on the outside. And could they be members maybe of the other members of the Sinister Six? Because, Sony still, it feels like Sony still wants to do the Sinister Six movie, so, are they gonna introduce them that way? I don't know. But speaking of that scene, since we're talking about it, the scene plays out. He comes up and he tells Adrian that he heard a rumor that he knows the real identity of Spider-Man, and Adrian doesn't give up the rumor because he says, if I knew who he was, he'd be dead already. So that scene plays out, and then he walks away, and he kind of has that little smile on his face. And a lot of people kind of been interpreting that scene in some way. For me, when I first saw it, and even the second time I saw it, it looks like Vulture will have maybe some sort of involvement in the sequels. Right now, Michael Keaton's already signed. He was only signed on for one movie. So, if they bring him back, I would love to see if they bring him back, because I would love to see that scene, that post-credit scene, play out for the rest of for the other movies. So, when I first saw it, I was like, oh, maybe Adrian, doesn't want to give Pierce identity because he wants to deal with it himself. But at the same time, you have to think about everything else that happened throughout the movie. He saves Liz's life. He doesn't tell Liz that he's Spider-Man. He saves Adrian's life at the very end of the movie. And he even says he admires him for a lot of the stuff that he does. So maybe that scene kind of plays out. Maybe there's some redemption for Adrian. Maybe it's a redemption scene for him. He's not giving up the identity because he respects Peter enough to not give his identity and maybe potentially even put his family in danger. Because if they find out who he is, and they find out that his daughter went to school with Peter, and maybe they'll use her as leverage or something. I don't know. But that scene is when that scene played out, it was very interesting to watch the first time, because you didn't know kind of what it was going to... And it just leads to a bunch of questions. Some people will probably see it as him redeeming himself, or some people would see it as him just leaving that for a potential future sake, for a potential future bargaining chip, or for his own personal gain if he ever comes back. Who knows? So that's the nice thing about that scene. You can see it kind of in different ways, but I'm leaning a little bit toward redemption, and that kind of what it seemed like afterwards when I read some of the interviews by the director and Kevin Feige and all those people. So moving on, Donald Glover, of course, appears in the movie. He plays Aaron Davis, and you see in the little window that Karen pops up that he plays the Prowler in the movie. It says aliases and the Prowler, and of course the Prowler is a character in the comic books, and he mentions when Peter's interrogating him, probably another one of the funniest scenes, another very funny scene in the movie. He says he has a nephew that lives in the area, and of course, if you're fans of the comics and you know the name Aaron Davis, you know that his nephew is indeed Miles Morales, aka the person that takes over the Spider-Man mantle in the Marvel Ultimates line in the comics. And many people were very happy about that. I don't know if people caught that in the movie. I'm sure the mega fans did, but that was a very interesting idea. The fact that Miles Morales is indeed in this universe. We don't know how old he is. He just says he has a nephew that lives in the area. But I don't know. Maybe we'll see Miles in the future. Maybe, who knows? The principal in the school. I didn't realize this the first time I saw it, and I saw it the second time. The principal of the school, played by Kenneth Choi, he has a picture of the Howling Commandos from Captain America: The First Avenger in his office, and it's noteworthy because Choi actually played one of the Howling Commandos in that movie, and I forgot about that. So it looks like he's playing his own descendant in the movie, which is pretty cool. Also, Martin Henderson, who plays the debate teacher in the movie, he also was in a previous Marvel movie. He was in The Incredible Hulk, the one with Edward Norton. He has a very small role in that movie, so there's probably likely no connection to that, but it's a very nice little coincidence. And of course, Jennifer Connelly was in the first Hulk movie, but of course she only does the voice in this movie as well. Betty Brant also appears in the movie. She's played by Angourie Rice from The Nice Guy. She's one of Liz's friends and a reporter for the school's news channel. We don't really see Betty a lot in the movie. We see her just in those in that school news channel, which pops up like 2 or 3 times in the movie. And then of course she is with Liz when they're playing the F Marry Kill game. But that's it. We don't really see her a lot. We see her hugging Liz as she's leaving the school, so maybe Betty will have a bigger role in the future of the films. Betty, of course, does have a history with Peter in the comics and does have a history with Ned in the comics, so she definitely is a big player in the comics world with the two characters. So we'll see what happens with that. The school mural in the movie does, very briefly, we see Howard Stark very briefly in the movie. Also, apparently, Abraham. I didn't see this, but I saw it. I saw it in some of the Easter egg columns that have been released since the movie has come out. Abraham Escrian, the guy that gives, I think that's his last name wrong. The guy that gives the super soldier serum to Captain America. He's apparently on one of the murals in the school as well. Also, Bruce Banner is in one of the walls. He's not in the mural. He's in one of the walls. I believe it's the science scene, or the science classroom, or the math classroom. I forget. I think it's the math classroom, where Peter's looking at his laptop at old footage of himself, and Flash gets the answer wrong. Very near the beginning of the movie, if you look up in the with all the pictures are lined up, it's at the very end on the right, it's Bruce Banner, which is kind of cool. So all the Avengers kind of appear in the movie as well. Of course, the imitation scene where Peter is Thor. There's that too. So that's kind of cool. This is another one I didn't know was a nice little flashback. Issue 33. So if you're a big Spider-Man fan, you know that. It's the image of a half-faced Peter and a half-faced Spider-Man. Of course, the way the scene plays out in the movie is, after the building falls on him and he's, looking down and he's remembering what Tony said to him, if you're nothing about that suit, you don't deserve to have it, or you don't deserve it, or anything like that. And this is the scene where, he's looking down and it's the puddle and he's looking up, and that gives him the confidence to finally overcome his odds and overcome his fears of being Spider-Man. And in that scene, it's a very nice little touch, and I love they did this. He doesn't say, "Come on, Peter," when he's trying to lift the building off him. He says at the very beginning, but then he says, "Come on, Spider-Man." He keeps saying it. He says, "Come on, Spider-Man." It's a nice little touch because he's not Peter Parker in that scene. He is Spider-Man in that scene. And I love that. I love that they did that in the movie. I don't know if this was intentional. Maybe there was some... It felt like they were doing some pseudo-nods to the past film when Peter is avoiding the Vulture's wings right before the building collapses on him and he's flying around. It almost looks like Peter's avoiding Vulture's wings, similar to how he avoided Green Goblin's glider in the Sam Raimi movies. I don't know if that was intentional. That's kind of how I viewed it. Maybe I'm looking too much into that, but that's how I viewed it. And of course, the big one is when Peter saves the debate team in DC, and Liz is there, and Karen, of course, tells Peter to tell Liz how he feels, and then he tells her to kiss her. Of course, they're in the very exact positions like Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst were in the alleyway kiss, and then of course he falls down to comedic effect, and it's very cool. Of course, at the very end, we see not only the return of Pepper Potts, played by Gwyneth Paltrow. It's very interesting. Looks like her and Tony made up. Of course, Civil War kind of hinted at some troubles between the two, but they're back together in this one. We see what essentially probably is the Iron Spider suit, or at least a version of it from the comics. And this is when Tony offers him the opportunity to join the Avengers and to go out there and do a press conference to officially become a part of the Avengers to the public, but he turns it down, and you think it's a test, but it's not really, because of course again Pepper Potts comes in. That was really cool. The spider, the iron, but I assume it's the Iron Spider suit, although it looks a lot like his old suit, but I assume that's probably what that suit is supposed to be. So I seeing that suit, I was enamored by it. I love the fact that they would even go that far and be like, hey, this is your future right here. That's essentially what it is. It's a tease to seeing, because we're going to see him in that suit. Absolutely we're going to see him in that suit, even if it's just for a scene. We are going to see him in that suit, and I love the fact that they teased that out. I love it. So all in all, I really liked Spider-Man Homecoming. The humor is top-notch, most of the characters really work, and overall, it's a damn fun movie. Like I mentioned, if you asked me to describe Spider-Man Homecoming in one word, it would be fun. It really would. Tom Holland is a great Peter Parker and Spider-Man. I can't wait to see what they do. The ending of the movie, of course, that changes everything in the dynamic, and it just finally... and no offense to the other movies, I love the other movies, except you, Spider-Man 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 2. You terrible movies. But I love the other movies, but I feel like Spider-Man Homecoming really kind of finally captured the spirit of the character a little bit. And I know some people will have problems, the fact that it's not the Mary Jane from the comics that they all know, or even Flash, the fact that Flash, it feels like, we always see Flash being kind of like the more kind of, jockey character. In this movie, he's not really necessarily a jockey, he's just a smartass who thinks he's better than everyone else. And the fact, I think people were I think I've seen some people, a little upset with the casting or not upset, but they were just confused by the casting of that, because I guess they want Flash Thompson to be bigger. And Tony, I'm not gonna even try to pronounce his last name, but him and Holland are kind of the same height, so I think Tom Holland may have a little bit of a few inches on him, but I don't know. That's just whatever. But the movie is just great. It's just a lot of fun. They finally got the character right. I'm glad that Sony worked out a deal with Marvel to have the character join the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I can't wait to see what they do in the future. I can't wait to see how they bring this character to life even more. So my rating for it is, I stick to my rating that I gave last week in the non-spoiler thoughts in the podcast. To my written non-spoiler review, I'm sticking with the rating 4.5 out of 5 for Spider-Man Homecoming. It is damn fun. I loved it. I saw it twice in the same weekend, which isn't really that much. I've done that before, but I was looking forward to seeing it again more than I was more than I have been for, a no, it's not double features, but seeing the same movie twice in the span of a few days, it's not necessarily too rare for me, especially if the movie's really great, but I was really excited to go watch it the second time because I knew how good it was. I knew how great it was. And I will be very hard-pressed to say that I'm not going to go watch it again, because I am going to go watch it again, probably. Not right away, but, probably somewhere down the line in a couple weeks, during the middle of the week, probably. So, yeah, that's it. So thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast, to the opening week podcast, a spoiler podcast, a Spider-Man Homecoming. Of course, it doesn't matter what I think, although it is my podcast, but I want to know what you guys think. So let me know down below, wherever you're listening to this. If you're listening to this on YouTube or SoundCloud or on iTunes, let me know what you thought, whether in the comment section or on my Facebook, my Instagram, my Twitter. All the links that you guys need are down below in the comments. I did it! Damn it! I was doing so good. I've been doing good for that. I haven't said comments in a while, but everything you can find to leave me your thoughts on Spider-Man Homecoming are either down below in the comment section or in the description/show notes area. I was doing so good. But yeah, let me know what you guys thought of the movie. Obviously, my opinion is one thing, but your opinion is, of course, the other thing, and I would love to hear from you guys. By the way, if you're listening to this on iTunes, first of all, thank you very much for doing that. While you're here, can you please leave me a rating, a review, and subscribe to the iTunes. It really helps me out. It helps me out in the long run to stay here on iTunes and keep uploading, and knowing you guys are fans of it. So let me know. So yeah, do that. And if you leave a comment and rating and review, I will read it here on the podcast for your listening pleasures. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast again this week. Be sure to tune in later this week for the weekly roundup movie news podcast. At the end of the week, we'll of course go over again all the movie news that's come out throughout the week. We'll talk about the trailers, and of course we'll give you a preview of the movies that are coming out over the weekend. And speaking of that preview, those movies that are coming out this weekend, I will be reviewing next week here on the Movie Pit Spoiler Review Podcast. The big movie coming out this week is, of course, War for the Planet of the Apes. I will be reviewing that next week here on the reviewing that here on the podcast. Also coming out is Wish Upon, the new horror movie with Joey King. I'm probably going to go and end up watching that, so maybe I'll also spoiler review that here on the podcast as well. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. But that is a preview for next week here on the spoiler review podcast portion of the Movie Pit. So thank you guys so much for listening to once again for the spoiler review podcast. Be sure to stay tuned for later in the week for the weekly roundup of news. And that's it. Enjoy the rest of your week, guys. Thank you guys so much once again for listening. As always, have a safe, fun rest of the week, and go watch some movies.
Whoop whoop! Yeah! Give it up! Movies!